In the heart of New York City, amidst towering skyscrapers and bustling streets, there lived a family whose name was synonymous with wealth and luxury. The Thompsons were not just rich, they were billionaires, known for their extravagant lifestyle and impeccable taste in everything from fashion to food. But behind the gilded doors of their sprawling mansion lay a problem that no amount of money seemed to fix. Their kids refused to eat. The father, a self-made tycoon who had built his empire brick by brick, worked tirelessly to provide the best life possible for his family. His wife, equally glamorous and always seen at high-profile events, made sure their home reflected their status. Together they had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, all under the age of 12. While they lacked nothing material, one thing puzzled everyone around them. No matter what dish was placed before them, the kids simply wouldn't touch it. It wasn't as if they didn't have options. Over the years, the Thompsons had hired some of the finest chefs and nannies in the world. They brought in experts trained in Michelin-starred kitchens, people who could whip up anything from delicate French pastries to exotic Asian delicacies. Yet every attempt ended in disappointment. Plates came back untouched, or worse, thrown across the room during tantrums. The parents tried reasoning with their children, bribing them, even grounding them, but nothing worked. It got so bad that mealtime became a battleground. The dining table, which should have been a place of connection and joy, turned into a source of stress for the entire household. The kids complained about how gross or boring the food tasted, while the adults grew increasingly frustrated. No one could figure out why these privileged children, who had access to the best ingredients and culinary talent money could buy, kept rejecting everything they were served. Desperate for a solution, the mother decided to take matters into her own hands. She started researching different approaches, consulting nutritionists, child psychologists, and even other wealthy families facing similar issues. One suggestion stood out among all the advice she received. Perhaps the problem wasn't the food itself, but the lack of emotional connection behind it. Someone mentioned hiring someone who cooked not just with skill, but with heart, a person who understood the value of comfort food and its ability to bring people together. That's when Clara entered their lives. A quiet, hard-working woman in her early 30s, Clara came from a small town far removed from the glitz and glamour of New York City. Life hadn't been easy for her. After losing both her parents unexpectedly, she found herself responsible for raising her younger siblings. To make ends meet, she took on odd jobs wherever she could find them. Eventually, through sheer determination and grit, she landed a position as a maid at the Thompson mansion. When Clara first walked through the grand entrance of the estate, she couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. Everything was bigger, shinier, and more expensive than anything she had ever seen. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, marble floors gleamed beneath her feet, and artwork worth millions adorned the walls. Despite the opulence, however, there was something missing, an intangible warmth that homes are supposed to have. As she began her duties, tidying up rooms and dusting surfaces, she noticed the tension in the air. The staff whispered about the ongoing struggle with the children's eating habits, and the frustration of the parents was palpable. One day, while cleaning the kitchen, Clara overheard another failed attempt at feeding the kids. The latest nanny chef had prepared an elaborate spread featuring lobster bisque, truffle risotto, and chocolate soufflé. But instead of delight, the meal was met with disdain. The youngest child pushed away her plate dramatically, declaring it yucky, while the older ones followed suit, leaving the dining room in a huff. Watching the scene unfold, Clara felt a pang of sadness. She knew firsthand the power of food to heal and connect, and seeing such beautiful dishes go to waste broke her heart. Summoning her courage, she approached the mother later that afternoon. "Ma'am," she said softly, choosing her words carefully, "I don't mean to overstep, but maybe the kids need something simpler, something that reminds them of home." The mother looked at Clara, surprised by the suggestion. Most of the staff avoided offering opinions, especially on matters involving the children. But there was something genuine about Clara's tone, something earnest and sincere. After a moment of hesitation, she nodded. "You're right," she said finally. "We've tried everything else. Why not give this a shot?" And just like that, Clara found herself standing in the massive kitchen, tasked with preparing dinner for the billionaire family. Though nervous, she reminded herself of the lessons her grandmother had taught her long ago. Food, she believed, was more than just fuel. It was love, memory, and tradition all rolled into one. With that thought in mind, she set to work, determined to create something that would speak directly to the hearts of the children. What happened next would change the course of their lives forever, not just for the kids, but for Clara too. What'll it mean? Did anyone know? This humble maid was about to teach the Thompsons a lesson they'd never forget. Sometimes the simplest things hold the most meaning. Clara's journey to the Thompson mansion was anything but ordinary. Born and raised in a small, tight-knit community in rural Texas, she grew up surrounded by open fields, chirping crickets, and the comforting aroma of her grandmother's cooking wafting through their modest home. Life wasn't easy for Clara, but it was rich in ways money couldn't measure. Her family didn't have much, but they had each other, and they had food. Food was the glue that held them together, especially during tough times. Her grandmother, a woman whose hands were always dusted with flour or stained with spices, was the heart of their household. She taught Clara everything she knew about cooking, not just as a skill but as an expression of love. Food isn't just something you eat, her grandmother would say while stirring a pot of stew on the stove. It's how you show people you care. It's how you tell your story. Those words stuck with Clara throughout her life, shaping the way she saw the world and the role food played in it. Every dish her grandmother made carried meaning. Tacos filled with tender, shredded chicken weren't just tacos. They were memories of Sunday afternoons spent laughing around the table. Sweet, gooey churros dipped in cinnamon sugar weren't just snacks. They were reminders of county fairs where Clara and her siblings ran wild with sticky fingers. Even simple things like rice simmered with tomatoes and onions felt special, because they came from a place of love. To Clara, cooking wasn't about perfection. It was about connection. But life took a sharp turn when tragedy struck. Clara's parents passed away unexpectedly, leaving her as the sole caregiver for her younger siblings. Overnight, she went from being a carefree teenager to shouldering responsibilities far beyond her years. With no one else to rely on, she did what she had to do. She worked tirelessly to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. Jobs were scarce in her small town, so she saved every penny she earned from babysitting, cleaning houses, and helping out at the local diner. Eventually, the burden became too heavy to bear alone. Determined to give her siblings a better future, Clara made the difficult decision to move to New York City. It was a daunting leap, from the quiet countryside to the chaotic concrete jungle. But she knew it was the only way to provide for her family. The city was overwhelming at first, with its towering buildings, honking cars, and fast-paced energy. But Clara adapted quickly, taking on any job she could find. She cleaned offices, walked dogs, and even worked late-night shifts at a bakery, kneading dough until her hands ached. One day, while scrolling through online job postings, Clara stumbled upon an ad for a maid position at a wealthy family's mansion. The pay was decent and the hours were flexible enough for her to send money back home. Without hesitation, she applied, never imagining that this job would change her life in ways she couldn't predict. The interview process was nerve-wracking. Clara arrived wearing her best outfit, a plain blouse and neatly pressed pants, feeling completely out of place among the polished surroundings. But the staff manager saw something in her, a quiet determination, a willingness to work hard, and a kindness that shone through despite her nervousness. Within days, she was offered the job. Working at the Thompson mansion was unlike anything Clara had experienced before. The sheer size of the house was staggering, with rooms upon rooms to clean and maintain. The staff moved efficiently, almost robotically, adhering to strict schedules and protocols. At first, Clara felt like an outsider, unsure of how to fit in. But she threw herself into her work, scrubbing floors, dusting shelves, and organizing closets with the same dedication she brought to everything else in her life. What struck Clara most about the mansion, though, was the emptiness that lingered beneath its luxurious surface. For all its beauty, the house lacked warmth. There were no cozy corners where families gathered to share stories, no lingering sense of homemade meals filling the air. Instead, there was an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional clink of fine china or the distant echo of footsteps on marble floors. This emptiness was particularly evident in the kitchen, a space designed to rival professional restaurants. Gleaming appliances lined the counters, and rows of expensive ingredients filled the pantry. Yet, despite its state-of-the-art equipment, the kitchen felt unused, sterile. Clara often found herself wondering why such a magnificent space wasn't brimming with life, laughter, and the sounds of sizzling pans or bubbling pots. As weeks turned into months, Clara began to notice patterns. The children, the two boys and the girl, were polite enough when spoken to but seemed distant, almost disconnected. They rarely smiled, and their eyes held a sadness that tugged at Clara's heart. During her cleaning rounds, she'd overhear snippets of conversations between the parents and the staff, mostly about the ongoing struggle to get the kids to eat. Each failed meal attempt added another layer of frustration to the household, creating a tense atmosphere that everyone tried to ignore but couldn't escape. Despite the challenges, Clara remained optimistic. She believed in the power of food, to heal wounds, bridge gaps, and bring people closer together. Growing up, meals had been sacred moments in her family, a time to pause, reflect, and connect. Even now, whenever she thought of her grandmother's kitchen, she felt a deep sense of comfort and belonging. If given the chance, Clara knew she could recreate that magic, even in a place as cold and impersonal as the Thompson mansion. Little did she know, that chance was closer than she imagined. One afternoon, while tidying up the kitchen after yet another disastrous meal, Clara overheard the mother venting her frustrations. The latest nanny chef had prepared an elaborate feast featuring delicacies from around the world, yet the children had rejected it outright, declaring it gross and storming out of the dining room. Watching the defeated look on the mother's face, Clara felt a surge of empathy. She understood what it was like to feel helpless, to want nothing more than to make someone happy but not knowing how. Summoning her courage, Clara approached the mother later that day. "Ma'am," she said softly, choosing her words carefully, "I don't mean to overstep, but maybe the kids need something simpler, something that reminds them of home." The mother looked at Clara, surprised by the suggestion. Most of the staff avoided offering opinions, especially on matters involving the children, but there was something genuine about Clara's tone, something earnest and sincere. After a moment of hesitation, she nodded. "You're right," she said finally. "We've tried everything else. Why not give this a shot?" And just like that, Clara found herself standing in the massive kitchen, tasked with preparing dinner for the Billionaire family. Though nervous, she reminded herself of the lessons her grandmother had taught her long ago. Food, she believed, was more than just fuel. It was love, memory, and tradition all rolled into one. With that thought in mind, she set to work, determined to create something that would speak directly to the hearts of the children. What happened next would change the course of their lives forever, not just for the kids, but for Clara too. Little did anyone know this humble maid was about to teach the Thompsons a lesson they'd never forget. Sometimes the simplest things hold the most meaning. It was late afternoon when Clara stood in the Thompson mansion's sprawling kitchen, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. The mother had given her permission to cook dinner, but this wasn't just any meal. It was a chance to prove that food could be more than something fancy or complicated. It was a chance to show that food could bring people together, even in a house as grand and distant as this one. Clara took a deep breath and looked around the gleaming kitchen. Rows of stainless steel appliances sparkled under the bright lights, and shelves were stocked with ingredients imported from all over the world. But instead of feeling intimidated by the luxury surrounding her, Clara focused on what she knew best: simple, comforting dishes made with love. She didn't need truffles or caviar to make magic. All she needed were the basics: chicken, spices, tortillas, rice, and beans. These humble ingredients, she believed, held the power to heal and connect. She started by pulling out a few key items from the pantry: dried chilies, canned tomatoes, garlic, onions, and chicken thighs. Back home, these were staples in her grandmother's kitchen, the building blocks of countless meals that brought her family closer. As Clara chopped onions and minced garlic, the sharp scents filled the air, cutting through the usual sterile silence of the mansion. For the first time in weeks, the kitchen felt alive, buzzing with energy and purpose. The dish she decided to prepare was one of her favorites, a recipe passed down from her grandmother. Shredded chicken simmered in a smoky chipotle sauce, served in soft corn tortillas with fresh toppings. It was a dish that reminded her of lazy Sunday afternoons spent laughing with her siblings, of rainy days when the warmth of a homemade meal made everything feel okay. If there was ever a dish capable of breaking through the icy walls of the Thompson household, this was it. As the chicken simmered on the stove, filling the air with its rich, savory aroma, Clara couldn't help but smile. She remembered how her grandmother used to say, "If you put your heart into it, people will taste the difference." That thought gave her confidence. This wasn't just about feeding hungry kids. It was about sharing a piece of herself, a story told through flavors and textures. While the chicken cooked, Clara turned her attention to the sides. She whipped up a batch of creamy refried beans, seasoned with just the right amount of salt and pepper. Next came fluffy white rice, cooked with a touch of tomato paste for color and flavor. And finally, she rolled up her sleeves and got to work, making handmade tortillas. Kneading the dough, pressing it into perfect circles, and cooking them on a hot skillet brought back memories of her childhood. Her grandmother always insisted on making tortillas from scratch, saying store-bought ones lacked soul. Clara agreed wholeheartedly. By the time everything was ready, the entire mansion smelled incredible. The scent of sizzling meat, toasted tortillas, and fragrant spices drifted down the hallways, drawing curious glances from the staff and even the parents. The kids, who usually avoided the dining room like the plague, wandered in cautiously, their noses twitching as they followed the irresistible aroma. When Clara placed the spread on the table, the scene was almost comical. There were no fancy plating techniques or towering garnishes, just steaming plates of food arranged simply yet invitingly. Bowls of shredded chicken, warm tortillas, vibrant toppings like chopped cilantro, diced onions, and lime wedges sat side by side with the beans and rice. To Clara, it looked like home. To the Thompsons, it looked different. The mother raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "This is it?" she asked, her tone laced with doubt. Clara nodded, trying not to let her confidence waver. "Yes, ma'am," she replied softly. "It's nothing fancy, but I promise it's full of heart." The father, who had joined them at the table, chuckled nervously. "Well, let's see if the kids approve," he said, gesturing for everyone to dig in. The children hesitated at first, eyeing the unfamiliar food with suspicion. But then, the youngest one reached out tentatively, grabbing a tortilla and spooning some chicken onto it. After adding a sprinkle of cilantro and a squeeze of lime, she took a cautious bite and froze. For a moment, no one spoke. Then slowly tears began to well up in the little girl's eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of something else entirely, something unexpected. The boy sitting next to her watched curiously, then grabbed his own taco and took a bite. His reaction mirrored his sister's, wide-eyed wonder followed by an uncharacteristic silence. Even the oldest child, who usually wore a perpetual scowl, couldn't resist trying it. One bite was all it took. He blinked, looking at Clara as if seeing her for the first time. "This is amazing," he mumbled, reaching for seconds before anyone else had finished their first serving. The parents exchanged astonished glances. Never before had their kids devoured a meal so enthusiastically. Plates that were once pushed away untouched were now being scraped clean. The dining room, usually quiet and tense, erupted with chatter and laughter. For the first time in years, the Thompson family shared a meal without arguments or complaints. As the evening wore on, Clara quietly cleaned up the kitchen, listening to the sounds of joy coming from the other room. She felt a lump in her throat, overwhelmed by the realization that her simple cooking had done more than fill stomachs. It had opened hearts. The kids weren't just eating. They were connecting with each other, with their parents, and with her. Later that night, as Clara lay in bed reflecting on the day, she realized something important. The Thompsons may have had wealth beyond imagination, but they lacked the one thing money couldn't buy: genuine connection. And maybe, just maybe, she had found her purpose in this big, cold mansion, not as a maid, but as someone who could remind them of the beauty of simplicity, of love expressed through food, and of the warmth that comes from sharing a meal together. What happened next would only deepen the bond between Clara and the family, proving that sometimes the smallest gestures can leave the biggest impact. The next morning, Clara woke up with a mix of excitement and nerves. She replayed the events of the previous evening in her mind, the kids' reactions, the laughter at the table, the way even the parents seemed lighter, happier. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental to her. For years, she had poured her heart into cooking for her siblings, using food as a way to keep their family together after losing their parents. Now, standing in the Thompson mansion's kitchen, she realized that her approach to cooking, simple, heartfelt, and full of memories, had touched lives in ways she hadn't expected. As the days turned into weeks, Clara continued preparing, meals inspired by her childhood. Each dish carried a piece of her story, a fragment of her past that she shared without saying a word. One day she made tamales, carefully wrapping the masa dough around spiced meat and steaming them in corn husks. Another day she prepared arroz con leche, a creamy rice pudding scented with cinnamon and vanilla, just like her grandmother used to make. Every meal was an invitation, not just to eat, but to connect, to remember, and to feel. The kids began looking forward to these meals more than anything else. They would rush to the dining room, their usual indifference replaced with genuine curiosity. "What are we having today?" the youngest one would ask eagerly, peering into pots and pans. While Clara worked, the older ones, who once rolled their eyes at the mention of dinner, now lingered in the kitchen, watching her chop vegetables or stir sauces. Sometimes they even offered to help, though their attempts were clumsy and often ended with flour, dusting their clothes or spices spilled on the counter. Clara didn't mind the mess. In fact, she encouraged it. Cooking, she told them, wasn't about perfection. It was about joy, experimentation, and sharing. She showed them how to knead dough for tortillas, letting them press it into imperfect circles. She taught them how to roll churros, laughing when the dough stuck to their fingers. These moments weren't just about learning recipes. They were about creating memories, building trust, and bridging the gap between a maid from a small town and three privileged children who had never known hardship. Over time, the kids started opening up to Clara. At first, it was little things, comments about school, complaints about homework, or jokes about their teachers. But soon they began sharing deeper thoughts and feelings. The middle child confided that he missed his parents, who were always busy with work. The oldest admitted that he felt pressure to live up to the family name, even though he didn't know what he wanted to do with his life. The youngest talked about how lonely she sometimes felt, despite living in a house filled with people. Clara listened patiently, offering words of comfort when needed, but mostly letting them speak. She understood what it was like to carry burdens too heavy for young shoulders, and she wanted them to know they weren't alone. Slowly, she became more than just the person who cooked their meals. She became someone they trusted, someone they could turn to when the world felt overwhelming. Even the parents noticed the change. Meals, which had once been a source of stress, became something to look forward to. The father, who rarely spent time at home, started coming back earlier to join the family for dinner. The mother, who had spent years trying to navigate the challenges of raising picky eaters, found herself smiling more often. There was a warmth in the air that hadn't been there before, a sense of connection that went beyond blood ties. One evening, as the family gathered around the table for another of Clara's creations, a hearty pot of pozole, a traditional soup filled with hominy and tender pork, the conversation took an unexpected turn. The youngest child asked Clara where she learned to cook so well. Without hesitation, Clara began telling them about her grandmother, describing her as a woman whose hands were always busy but whose heart was even fuller. She spoke of Sunday afternoons spent in the kitchen, of rainy days when the smell of simmering stews made everything feel cozy, and of holidays where the entire family came together to share food and laughter. Her voice softened as she talked about losing her parents and taking care of her siblings. "Food was the only thing that kept us going," she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "It reminded us of happier times, of love that couldn't be taken away. And I guess I wanted to bring some of that here, to this house." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed her words. For the first time, the kids saw Clara not just as the maid or the cook, but as a person with her own struggles and triumphs. They realized that the meals she prepared weren't just food. They were pieces of her soul, offerings of kindness meant to heal and unite. That night, as Clara cleaned up the kitchen, the mother approached her. Her expression was soft, almost vulnerable. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice trembling slightly. "You've done more for this family than anyone else ever has." Clara shook her head, embarrassed by the praise. "I didn't do anything special," she replied. "Just what my grandmother taught me, to cook with love." But the truth was, Clara had done something special. She had reminded the Thompsons of something they had forgotten, that wealth doesn't guarantee happiness, and that the simplest things, a warm meal, a shared laugh, a moment of connection, can mean the most. As the weeks passed, the transformation in the household became undeniable. The dining room, once a battleground, became a sanctuary. The kids no longer saw mealtime as a chore but as an opportunity to bond with each other and with Clara. Even the staff noticed the shift. The tension that had hung over the mansion for so long began to lift, replaced by a sense of warmth and belonging. For Clara, this newfound role brought both joy and challenges. While she cherished the bond she had formed with the family, she also faced whispers from some of the other staff members. Not everyone appreciated her growing influence, and rumors began to circulate that she was overstepping her boundaries. Some accused her of trying to rise above her station, questioning why a maid should have such a close relationship with the family. Despite the negativity, Clara remained focused on what mattered most: the children and the positive impact she was making. She knew that jealousy and gossip came with the territory, especially in a place like the Thompson mansion, but she refused to let it dampen her spirit. If anything, it made her more determined to prove that her intentions were pure, that all she wanted was to bring light into a home that desperately needed it. Little did she know, the challenges she faced would only strengthen her resolve and further solidify her place in the hearts of the Thompson family. What started as a simple act of cooking had blossomed into something far greater, proving that sometimes the smallest gestures can leave the biggest mark. As Clara continued to cook for the Thompson family, her presence in their lives grew beyond the kitchen. The children began seeking her out not just during mealtimes but throughout the day. They would find excuses to visit her while she cleaned or folded laundry, eager to share stories about their day or ask questions about hers. It was a shift that no one had anticipated, not even Clara herself. What started as a simple task of preparing food had evolved into something much deeper. A bond built on trust, understanding, and shared humanity. But not everyone was happy about this change. Some members of the household staff grew increasingly resentful of Clara's growing closeness with the family. In a mansion where roles were rigidly defined, maids cleaned, chefs cooked, nannies cared for the children, the idea of someone crossing those invisible lines made others uncomfortable. Whispers spread like wildfire among the staff. "Who does she think she is?" one maid muttered under her breath while polishing silverware. "She's just here to clean, not become part of the family," another added bitterly. The tension reached a boiling point when an anonymous note appeared on the father's desk one morning. Written in neat typed letters, it accused Clara of overstepping her role as a maid and interfering in family matters. The message hinted at favoritism and suggested that her actions could disrupt the professional balance of the household. The father read the note with furrowed brows, his mind racing. He prided himself on running a tight ship, and the last thing he wanted was discord among the staff. That evening after dinner, the father pulled the mother aside to discuss the situation. "We need to talk about Clara," he said, his tone serious. The mother raised an eyebrow, surprised by the sudden concern. "What about her?" she asked cautiously. He handed her the note explaining how it had appeared on his desk earlier that day. As she read it, her expression shifted from curiosity to irritation. "Are you seriously considering this?" she asked, folding the note and placing it on the table. "Clara has done nothing but bring positivity into this house. Have you seen the kids lately? They're happier, healthier, and more connected than they've ever been." "I know," the father replied, rubbing his temples. "But we can't ignore the complaints. If people feel like there's favoritism or that boundaries are being crossed, it could create problems." The mother sighed, leaning back in her chair. "This isn't about boundaries, it's about jealousy. Clara isn't trying to take anyone's place. She's simply doing what comes naturally to her. She cares about our kids, and they care about her. Isn't that what we've always wanted? For them to feel loved and supported?" Her words struck a chord with him, but the issue wasn't so easily resolved. Later that week, he decided to address the matter directly with Clara. Summoning her to his study, he sat behind his massive oak desk, looking every bit the intimidating billionaire tycoon. Clara entered the room nervously, unsure why she had been called in. Her hands trembled slightly as she clasped them together in front of her. "Clara," he began, his voice firm but measured, "there have been some concerns raised about your role in this household, specifically about how involved you've become with the children." Clara's heart sank. She had suspected that not everyone was pleased with her newfound connection to the family, but hearing it confirmed aloud stung nonetheless. "Sir," she said softly, choosing her words carefully, "I never intended to overstep. I only wanted to help, to make things better for the kids." The father studied her face, searching for any sign of insincerity. All he saw was honesty and vulnerability. Still, he pressed on. "Do you understand why this might be seen as problematic? This is a large estate with many staff members, and maintaining clear roles is important for keeping everything running smoothly." Clara nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "Yes, sir, I understand. But if I may, the children, they're not just clients to me. They're kids who needed someone to listen, to care. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I saw an opportunity to help and I took it." Her sincerity was undeniable, and the father found himself softening. Before he could respond, however, the door burst open, and the 3 children rushed in, their faces flushed with urgency. "Dad!" the oldest exclaimed, stepping forward boldly. "You can't send Clara away." The father blinked in surprise. "No one said anything about sending her away," he replied, though his tone betrayed his uncertainty. "Yes, you did," the middle child chimed in, tears welling up in his eyes. "We heard the staff talking. They said you're mad at Clara because she cooks for us and spends time with us. But she's the only one who makes us feel normal. She treats us like real people, not just rich kids." The youngest tugged at her father's sleeve, her voice trembling. "Please don't make her leave. She's our friend." The room fell, silent as the weight of their words settled over everyone. Clara stood frozen, tears streaming down her cheeks, overwhelmed by their defense of her. The father exchanged a glance with the mother, who had quietly joined them during the commotion. She gave him a small, knowing smile, silently urging him to see the truth in their children's plea. Finally, the father sighed, leaning back in his chair. "All right," he said, his voice softer now. "Let's clear something up. Clara isn't going anywhere. She's brought more happiness into this house than most of us combined. From now on, anyone who has a problem with that will have to answer to me." Relief washed over Clara, and she wiped her tears with the edge of her apron. The children cheered, hugging her tightly, their joy infectious. For the first time in weeks, the tension in the air dissolved, replaced by a sense of unity and gratitude. The following days, the atmosphere in the mansion shifted dramatically. The anonymous note was forgotten, and the whispers among the staff gradually faded. Those who had initially resented Clara began to see the positive changes she had inspired, not just in the children, but in the entire household. Even the other staff members started warming up to her, realizing that her intentions were genuine and that her presence benefited everyone. For Clara, the experience reinforced her belief in the power of kindness and authenticity. She hadn't set out to win over the Thompson family or prove anything to anyone. She had simply followed her heart, trusting that love and compassion could bridge even the widest gaps. And in doing so, she had reminded the Thompsons and herself that true wealth lies not in material possessions, but in the connections we forge and the love we share. As the weeks turned into months, Clara's role in the household expanded. Further, she wasn't just the maid or the cook anymore. She was a trusted member of the family, someone whose wisdom and warmth touched every corner of the mansion. The dining room, once a source of stress and frustration, became a place of laughter and storytelling. Meals weren't just about eating. They were about sharing, learning, and growing together. And through it all, Clara remained humble, grateful for the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of people who, despite their differences, were fundamentally human, searching for connection, meaning, and love just like everyone else.